Obamacare and Arkansas, the latest numbers, the anticipated expense. Hourly wages in Arkansas and the Arkansas Attorney General. Interest rates and Arkansas lenders. What if yours isn't a billion-dollar bank? And if the outcome in Arkansas seems more or less predictable, the demographics are no less provocative. Arkansas Week, next.
Arkansas Week is made possible in part by the Arkansas Times, keeping you informed by covering people, events, and politics in Arkansas. By FM 89, KUAR in Little Rock, with in-depth news reporting, analysis, and discussion each weekday.
This is Arkansas Week.
Hello again, everyone. Thanks for joining us for Arkansas Week. We begin tonight with the cost of health care for the low income in Arkansas and the cost of it. Michael Hiblin joins us from KUAR Public Radio in Central Arkansas. Wesley Brown, reporter, columnist for Talk Business and Politics, and Steve Bronner, an independent journalist. And thanks to everybody for coming in. Steve, we got numbers this week, updated numbers this week on Medicaid, the private option. Arkansas Works, it's kind of blends together after a while, but under the broadest rubric of Medicaid or Obamacare, we're up to something like almost 320,000 now.
We are 317,289. That's the most ever. And this is the private option, which is the program that uses federal Medicaid dollars to purchase private health insurance for individuals with incomes up to 138% of the poverty level. And it was created by a coalition of Republicans and Democrats in the legislature. The Republicans led it. And the numbers have continued to go up each year, each month actually. And that 317,000 includes those who have been moved into regular Medicaid because they were considered medically frail, and also those who are ready but have not yet started getting benefits. But the numbers keep going up and up. This has got to be very difficult for Republicans who supported it, because philosophically they would have told you before they voted yes that a government program will grow and that we had to watch for that. And yet they voted for this because they thought this was the best thing for the state, given the situation that we had and the overall national climate. And this was just best for Arkansas, with misgivings. And here, what they feared would happen is happening. The numbers grow each month, and the original projection was 250,000. So we're now well above that, and there's not a stopping point in sight. So the governor has asked DHS Director Cindy Gillespie, his insurance commissioner Alan Kerr, and his health insurance marketplace director Cheryl Smith Gardner to come up with some kind of plan to try to slow the growth. They're not the only ones who are doing this. The legislature has also been trying to figure out ways to slow the growth. But at this point, the private option / Arkansas Works continues to grow, and there's not a momentum to stop it right now.
Well, the governor, in fact, has, and Director Gillespie at DHS has indicated that she will have a report ready for the governor October 15th, about 3 weeks from now.
He's asked for it. It's a 5-year projection. This all occurs in the context of Arkansas seeking a waiver from the federal government that would change the private option to Arkansas Works, which is similar but includes more personal responsibility on the part of the recipients, and the goal is to, among other things, slow the cost and slow the growth. Something's got to happen because each session there's a struggle with this issue. It barely passes each time. You would think that this next session it won't be quite so controversial, but you never know. And these numbers growing each month doesn't help the cause.
Well, I think you said it may not be controversial, but I think as those costs continue to rise, it's going to be. I think it'll even get more controversial because of the fact that you have other programs that are. Highway plan, they're going to be seeking money for that. Economic development going to be seeking, and everything's going to get tight. And I think those costs that were predicted to either level off or go down have not shown up. And I think it's going to be really difficult, especially going into the legislative session.
Right. I mean, as controversial. I mean, because it's been catastrophically controversial so far. So there was a chance that this next session it would be not quite as bad, but with these new numbers, it could be just yet another session that's just totally dominated by this issue.
Yeah, and that's the last several sessions have been dominated by this issue. Other issues such as prisons, education, even though they are, there's some really important critical issues that are going on, they still don't get the attention that they need. And so these numbers are interesting, and I'm sure you, especially covering that issue, you're going to be hearing a lot more, especially from the lawmakers.
And what we haven't mentioned is that it's been free up until next year. In 2017, Arkansas begins paying 5%, and that number increases to 10%. And when a program is $1.6 billion a year, that's some real money. Well, free is for Arkansas taxpayers, not free for American taxpayers, of course.
Well, and amid all that, the administration still indicates that it wants to seek a cut in general revenue taxes come January.
We'll have to find money somewhere.
Yeah, the other thing, that 5-year plan, it'll be interesting to see if there are any savings, when Gillespie and the others come back with that 5-year plan. And I don't know if the governor has mandated that, they come back, that plan includes some cuts, but I think, and where are you going to find them? I guess that's the question.
Yeah, and the governor's plan, if this is approved to become Arkansas Works, then requires, as you said, a little more personal responsibility, and that might reduce the numbers.
That means co-pays, premiums, financial responsibilities.
Right, right.
Well, already the administration, though, or some of the General Assembly, or both, are trying to find ways to limit or project savings. Just this past week, through mental health counseling, to try to putting caps on that to try to hold down the expense of that.
Yeah,
and the clinical community reacted.
Yeah, and they've tried a number of things to. Everybody's. I think we reported on telemedicine as a way to kind of start cutting costs, and preventative. There's been discussion of preventative measures to start cutting costs, but none of those have been successfully implemented in a way that has cut the costs. And looking at these new numbers, it seems like they're going to continue to go up and go up. And more, I think we'll see more people, because it seems like in the labor market numbers, we're starting to get more people added to the workforce, more people are being added to the labor pool. So those numbers are going to keep going up.
Speaking of the workforce, the Obama administration's overtime rules, which were challenged by the Attorney General Arkansas Attorney General this week, in concert with several other of her peers across the country.
I think about 21 different states are challenging the overtime rules, which were implemented about 3 months ago by the Obama administration. They basically, what they do, they changed the overtime rule for people making $23,000 to now $47,000. It basically doubles the amount that to be paid to these workers who are working overtime. And as probably you would expect, the business community, the AGs are just the Chamber of Commerce are very upset about this. They've, I think the National Retail Federation has filed a lawsuit also, and the Attorney Generals are looking to file a lawsuit. So it's supposed to be implemented in December, but it may not get to that point. I think you're going to see a lot of legal maneuvering over this issue, and businesses are saying it's going to hurt them. But the Obama administration this is one of the things that they have really pushed, and I think it's going to be a really tough fight for the AG and the business community.
Yeah, the U.S. Labor Secretary Thomas Perez suggested this is partisan. He was quoted noting that overtime protections have receded over the years. They had applied to 62% of salaried workers in 1975, just 7% today. But yes, the states suggest this is a federal overreach and want to challenge this, but to take effect December 1st at this point.
Yeah, and I think the big question is, for workers is that, can employers compel workers who are working more than 40 hours to continue to only be paid for just that? There's been numerous stories out there of people working off the clock and employers forcing workers. So this rule by the Obama administration is to kind of close that gap and help. It's been called a great middle class. A lot of the liberal groups who have supported this have said this is one of the greatest things for middle class workers in terms of seeing their wages grow. So it's going to be a big fight. It's going to continue until December, and we may not see it be fully implemented by then because of the legal challenges.
Well, speaking of legal challenges, Steve, this past week the state Supreme Court dismissed one legal challenge to one of the marijuana proposals.
Right. The Supreme Court ruled that the ballot title in the Arkansas Medical Cannabis Act, which is the one that would legalize medical marijuana as a law and not as an amendment, that its ballot title is sufficient. So that was, it is the first of two suits against that one act. The other is by the sponsors of the other medical marijuana amendment that are saying that the signatures were not gathered properly. Meanwhile, the medical marijuana amendment has also been sued, as have the other proposals, the casinos and the tort reform, which has got, I think, 2 lawsuits against it. So I think that this was interesting in that if you couple it with recent Supreme Court decisions, and I did read the opinion, it does appear that the Supreme Court might be in the mood to try to keep these ballot initiatives on the ballot. That if they can find a reason to keep them on and let the voters have their say, that they may be willing to do that. So we'll see how this affects the other Supreme Court decisions that come down. We're going to, the election is in 6 weeks or 7 weeks, and early voting starts in a month.
Mm-hmm.
And so, these decisions have to come pretty quickly, or else we're going to be seeing ballots full of initiatives that we don't know that the votes are going to count.
Mm-hmm. Well, the court's got its calendar.
Yeah, and they're going to be considering these. There had been appeals to have oral arguments in these cases, and in this case, the court just took briefs and then made the ruling, but basically said that, yes, the ballot title doesn't have to explain everything, every potential consequence, and that was part of what was argued in this case. And this is the one that would allow for dispensaries, and I think people who didn't live within a certain radius of one could also then grow their own.
Okay.
Yeah, it's going to be on this ballot issue. There's 7 out there now, and it's going to be pretty complex. You walking into the booth, and some of these are. I've read some of the reading on some of this. They're going to be complex. You're going to have people in the ballot box for quite a while. It could be a problem coming into election time.
Well, I think the should I say the devout wish of some of the social cultural conservatives in the state is that it will be very confusing when it comes to the marijuana proposals, assuming either one or both survive.
Yeah, and a lot of times, especially with these ballot issues, you have to figure out, well, does yes do what I want it to do if I say yes, or does no do what I want it to do? And that's sometimes when you look at these ballot issues, they are confusing to the voters. So yes, you could have that very
instinct is to say no.
Yeah.
Well, you've done well by yourself. You convinced the Fed this past week to hold interest rates down. Now, so what?
Hold them down for just a short period of time. I do think that the Fed, Janet Yellen, and the Federal Open Market Committee will eventually, by the end of the year, raise interest rates probably a quarter point to 0.75%. What in Arkansas, what this has had an effect on is that I think the smaller local banks, the big banks are going to make their money. They even though the margins are smaller, but for smaller local banks, their margins have been really squeezed, and they haven't really seen the profits. But one of the things that they've done is made them run their businesses better. And I think once interest rates rise, you're going to see these banks, their profits are going to rise there, and you're going to see the community banks and those banks that things like car loans, personal loans, credit cards. You're going to see
credit.
Yeah, consumer credit. You're going to see consumers, if consumers are in the mood at the end of the year, that and I think the Fed is hoping that will inject a little bit more momentum into the consumer spending more, and that will boost the economy, and that's what raising interest rates are intended to do, to help the economy grow. And what we're seeing with our economy is that it's 2 steps forward, 1 step back. The labor market is doing right, but the inflation numbers are not where they want to be because of gas prices and crude oil prices. So, but I do think we will see interest rates rise for the end of the year, and it'll be good for some, but it'll be bad for some too. Some people don't want to see them rise.
Well, over coffee this morning, Mrs. Barnes was, of course, playing with her phone, and she came across something where the pros are predicting yet another warmer than usual winter. Mm-hmm. The implications for that being, of course, for power, but particularly fossil fuels, and especially natural gas in terms of those states with large fracking operations.
Yeah, you're already seeing this past week, natural gas prices have risen above $3 per British thermal unit, which is the first time we've seen it over $3 in a long while. The rig count is continuing to go up. So what I think we're going to see over the next several months is that both crude oil and natural gas prices are going to inch up, and we're going to start seeing a little bit of inflation in terms of our energy prices, which we've enjoyed for about a year now. Low gas prices, low energy prices, low gas bills, but I think that long period of enjoyment for consumers is going to end probably in early 2017 and that means all the way from our energy bills to our gas bills.
Well, in terms of Wesley, of overall consumer confidence, of course, the state department, the Hutchinson administration, the General Assembly, all looking at consumer confidence, willingness to spend at retail. We've got Christmas coming up. Christmas not being the great bonanza that sometimes we think it will be. Obviously, the state wants money, needs money. We spent the first 2/3 of this program talking about the expense of state government. What's the lay of the land going into this fourth quarter?
I still think consumers are cautious. Even the Fed said yesterday, earlier this week in their meeting, that they're taking a cautious approach because of consumers are being so cautious. And what we've seen in terms of, we talked about revenue report at the first 2 months of the year, the revenues were down, and I don't think you're seeing that excitement about the Christmas season and going into the holiday season that you're going to see it. So I think we're not, and speaking of going into the session, I don't think we're going to see the revenue growth or the growth in tax revenue that is expected. The forecast for the state was slightly below the first 2 months of the year, and we'll see if it for the rest of the last 4 months of the year if it's going to be the same. But if it is, then as Steve said earlier, going into session, it's going to be tough trying to fund everything from Medicaid to education to prisons to economic development going into session. It's going to be tough to do.
We have seen a lot of consumer debt disappear, though.
Yeah, we have.
They're spooked and they're paying off that.
Yeah, people are paying off their credit card bills. They're paying off a student loan debt, any kind of debt they can't pay off, and that has put consumers in their rightful position to control the economy. And I think that's where the Fed wants it to be. If consumers are the key people that are driving the community, driving the economy, then I think we're always going to be in a good spot.
Well, everybody will be tuned in Monday night, not to this network, although I don't know if PBS is carrying it on. Everybody else is. We have a great debate, but we've got some new numbers, guys, from Arkansas.
Yeah, the new poll Talk Business and Hendrix College put out show Donald Trump has widened his lead in Arkansas, 55% to 34% for Hillary Clinton. I believe this was, 54 to 30? What was it, back in June? It was 49 to 38%. So it suggested Donald Trump has kind of cemented his following in the state. No real surprise, obviously, going into Arkansas. But There was one correlation that was interesting. Hillary Clinton's 34%. That also correlates with the approval for President Obama, also at 34%. So Arkansans clearly kind of putting the two together there.
Steve?
Also interesting in that same poll was the high percentage of Arkansans who identify themselves as Republican and not independent. You know, the rest of the country has seen a shift where independents are really growing. In fact, are the largest bloc nationally. Whereas now, in Arkansas, 43% say they're Republican, 32% say Democrat. Only 20% of Arkansans say they're independent, which is quite low compared to the rest of the country. At the same time, as the polls show that Trump is winning easily, U.S. Senate candidate, U.S. Senator John Bozeman is very easily winning his race. He's the only one on the air. Conor Eldridge, the Democratic opponent, is at 29%, which is pretty low. So we've always known this was going to be a Trump election, and that was shown by the fact that Hillary's not here. If there was ever any chance that she was going to be competitive, we would have seen her here to try to grab Arkansas 6 electoral votes. We haven't. So this is basically, I mean, Arkansas is safely in the red in the red category. Hasn't voted for a Democrat since 1996, and that was Bill Clinton, native son. Hillary Clinton is not seen as a native daughter, and she just will not. Trump is going to win Arkansas.
Yeah, and I think also you're going to see down the ballot, it's going to be completely red. You're going to I think you're going to see a clean sweep in terms of Republicans from the state capitol all the way to the White House. It's going to be tough for Democrats to win anything. I think it's going to be pretty disappointing for the Democratic Party.
Well, is this going to be a referendum on Mr. Obama or Secretary Clinton? Well, novels, certainly, but there will be endless volumes. There will be dissertations, theses, student term papers written at the conclusion of this race in Arkansas and elsewhere. How much of Mr. Trump's vote was for him and how much against Secretary Clinton, and how much just against the establishment as a whole?
Well,
just a thumb in the eye.
I think it's all the above. I think that whereas across the country there's more holding of the nose to vote for Trump, in Arkansas I think there is a significant percentage of voters who he speaks to, and they support Trump because they support Trump. At the same time, you know, Arkansas flipped from 150 years of Democratic rule to now, for the foreseeable future, you know, we are strongly Republican. And that happened with the election of President Obama, and I guess the passage of the Affordable Care Act. But it was already happening at that point. So it's a referendum on President Obama, on Secretary Clinton, on a Democratic Party that probably is hard to stay in tune with some cultural values in Arkansas. It's all the above.
Yeah, one of the things I think will be interesting once Obama leaves office, and I heard a Republican analysts say this, was that will the Republicans be able, in Arkansas and nationally, will they be able to govern without blaming Obama from everything, from on every issue, even at the state level, which is always been odd to me. We in Arkansas, we have a Republican governor, legislature, House, and
Senate delegate.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting. How will they have full control? How will they be able to govern when they have that mantle?
Thoughts?
Part of this too is just on both sides the fear of the other candidate. The talk of people dislike Republicans, or people who consider themselves conservatives say they just are horribly scared of if Hillary were elected, and vice versa. Democrats just don't like Trump so much. The talk of fascism, this being the beginning of that in the United States. And then whoever is elected, whether or not they can actually get anything accomplished. You've had the Obama administration not able to work with Congress, whether or not then whoever is elected, and depending who wins Congress, obviously, but whether or not there would be any kind of being able to work together.
Governing coalition. I mean,
Yes.
it's almost Balkan or European in that sense. Well, I mean, you take a look at the Electoral College, and if you want to cut it geographically, it's almost like the U.S. has been turned into 4 countries. You've got the Northeast, the Midwest, Pacific Coast, and then Dixie, old Dixie.
Yeah,
2 blue, 2 red.
Yeah, and the one thing that's interesting over the last few weeks is that people are warming up to Trump. You know, I didn't think I would be able to say that, but people are getting more comfortable with the idea that Donald Trump could be our next president. And the polls are showing that. We've seen it in the local numbers from the Talk Business poll, and we're seeing it in some of the national polls that people, Ohio is now in play again, and other states are now in play for Trump. So Trump as president is not a foreign thought anymore.
Well, we'll leave it there because we're out of time. Guys, thanks to you for coming in. Thanks to you, as always, for watching. See you next week.
Arkansas Week is made possible in part by the Arkansas Times, keeping you informed by covering people, events, and politics in Arkansas. By FM 89, KUAR in Little Rock, with in-depth news reporting, analysis, and discussion each weekday.